So we're here. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Liz and Juna, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for having your books. Bennett has his book. I have no more of the new ones at home, so I still have this Maltese Jordan's not for resale proof copy with the box on it that I concluded late in the game that I would get sued over if I released it widely. So I got it. You got it. You guys have read it. Some people are reading it. And I'll drink wine. Cheers.
Cheers.
Nice. Juna, that is a good pour. Bennett, do you have Pinot Grigio?
Well, of course.
I have a nice chilled Malbec straight from the refrigerator. Nice.
Chilled?
Yeah. But I think it was only open like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Days ago, sorry.
That's how Jack Palms would do it.
Jack Palms would have a can of beer the size of his head. What are you drinking, Andrew?
Perrier. But I added some CBD oil, you know.
Wow. That is good stuff. Anyway, here we go. So there it is.
I have a question about Jack Palms. For purposes of writing a review or two, how would you describe his voice?
Obviously, just like mine. No? His voice like speaking or like his first-person voice?
His vernacular.
What?
His vernacular.
I don't know. No, we can hear you. That's a good question. Just write a review and then send it to me and I'll tell you how it looks.
No, I mean, he speaks in a very unique way. It's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it, is my problem. But I enjoy it, but I don't know how to describe it.
Do you mean in dialogue or in the first person?
Dialogue. He has kind of a street jive or something. I don't know. That's ancient, so I don't know what the... Yeah.
It's like an ex-Hollywood conversation, right?
Yeah, it seems to have more in it. I don't know.
I think it's cool. Oh, Brett is here. Good to see you, Brett. It just means, I don't know. That's a good question. I honestly had never thought about it. How would someone else describe Jack's voice? Does it feel stylized?
No, it's well written. I just don't know where you would go to hear that now. You know, would you go to a bar with a certain age group? Would you go to a certain part of town? Where is that language spoken?
Huh.
I think there's definitely a street smart quality.
Yeah.
I mean, like when they sit down and they start to discuss the sneakers at, and I can't remember the name of the hotel, but I mean, he's kind of jiving with the two guys back and forth, and he's obviously on his game, and he's saying funny stuff, and I just feel like he's savvy.
Well, he doesn't cut corners. I mean, he says it how he sees it.
Aging LA hipster.
That's close.
I don't know if aging and hipster can be combined in the same sentence. I think he's cool. It's my attempt at writing someone to be cool.
But he does have a vernacular. It's very strong. You have to go somewhere to hear 5 people talking to each other like that. And I don't know if it's a millennial bar or a ghetto in LA or
Maybe someplace in New York City. I don't know. I feel like
I'm surprised. I thought you'd have that, you know, that answer immediately.
Really? And what would the answer sound like?
Well, that's, you know, but it's obviously Boston suburbs or I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where is he from?
He's from the East Coast. He's from the Boston area, but then he left and he's been in California for a long time. Yeah, it's interesting. Like in Young Junius, they talk a very specific way, and I really had a sense about what that was. It's kind of like there is, if you read Jim Thompson, particularly The Grifters, the characters speak a certain way. And Megan Abbott did some of that in her book, Queen Pin. And I would say it's kind of it feels like a bit of a hard-boiled, dialogue, or a hard-boiled, I want to say like jive or patois, but those aren't the right words. Just kind of like a hard-boiled dialogue. I think it's kind of like a tough/cool. Oh, I muted you, Bennett. Go ahead.
Sorry. That's what I wanted to write in a review, that it was sort of a modern day version of the way in the golden era these guys talk to each other, back in the day when you're talking Damon Runyon and that kind of a modernized version of that. But then I realized, what did I know? I didn't want to say the wrong thing.
Well, I think if you look at a character like Chandler's Marlowe or Hammett's Sam Spade, like these guys are good with their words. Like they speak in an interesting way, and they're kind of witty and come up with real interesting stuff, but they're also irreverent. And there's something of that in Jack Palms as well. Yeah. You don't want him to be boring, but he's also got to be sort of tough and maybe like a little bit ahead of where everyone else is, but not always.
Who do you see him being played by? Like, who would play him in a movie to you?
Oh, great question.
I don't know. Like when people started asking me that, it was more than 10 years ago. And so originally it was something like, I don't know.
Well, we could start with, how old is he?
He's in his 30s.
He's in his 30s.
Yeah, early 30s.
And he's still like the failed action star he always was, right?
Yeah, he's a little weathered.
I don't know. Maybe Matthew McConaughey.
Hilarious.
Not
Matthew
in
McConaughey was great in True Detective.
He was. He was absolutely wonderful, but he's kind of sliding back downhill again.
But he's kind of a chameleon. Maybe he could do it.
Yeah, maybe he could. Let's think about a couple of others.
Matt Damon.
I don't know. Matt Damon is too short. Most of these like Matt Damon, Tom Cruise guys are way too short.
That's what they said about Tom Cruise playing Reacher, and I thought he did a great job of it.
Oh my God, I thought they were so right. Like there should be like a height minimum for a character like Reacher. For sure. Same with Bosch. I can't do Bosch with that guy Titus or what's his name as Reacher.
I don't know. Rainn Wilson is a different take entirely for Reacher. No, not Reacher, excuse me, for Maltese Jordan guy.
Who's Ray Wilson?
Rainn Wilson.
Don't know.
On The Office. Kind of funny guy. But okay, so now we don't know how you're casting it when you go ahead and have to sell that treatment for 7 figures. You got to work on this, Seth.
I'm working on it. I am. I actually am.
My man.
I'm doing things. Things are getting done. My most recent big endeavor has been making contact with sneaker collecting legends of sneaker collecting and writing about sneaker collecting. And so I've managed to make contact with 2 legends. One of them I sent the book to, and one of them I just got his address today. And he's literally the first guy who ever wrote about being a sneaker addict. And he's amazing. So yeah, there's some people that are getting the book that I'm excited about. If they actually read it and talk to someone about it, it could be legendary, epic.
Seth, In 100 words or less, would you tell those of us who are maybe over 50 what the whole sneaker culture is about? Because I'm confused by it.
How many pairs of shoes do you have, Connie?
About a zillion, but they're not sneakers. Only like 5 or 6 are sneakers, and none of them are Jordans.
That's okay. Well, there you have it.
Well, what can I say? Mimi Pons, in her seminal discussion, in her seminal work about shoes called "Shoes Never Lie," more essential than men, more addictive than drugs. Shoes never lie. But we
Yeah.
didn't think that was happening to you guys.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting is when I was growing up, when I was growing up, Jordan was so dominant and he was so electrifying to watch. He was just like doing amazing things, and it was amazing to watch him. Spike Lee was doing the commercials. The commercials were great. The sneakers looked amazing. Everybody wanted them. And so now, like as an adult, to be able to buy those sneakers that I couldn't get then for a variety of reasons, it's really enticing. Like, it's really cool to get to, like, there's a nostalgia value, but then there's also the value of holding it and looking at it and saying, like, this is really fucking cool. It's a really cool thing to hold. It's beautiful. It's like a piece of art, but you wear it. Oh, it's so nice. Look at that. Space
Do you
Jam.
actually wear the sneaker? Do sneakerheads wear the sneakers they collect, or is it just a purely collectible thing?
Well, some people will have debates like, oh, this one, would you rock that or stock that? And if you would stock it, then you just put it on the shelf and you never wear it. But some guys maintain that whatever you buy, you have to wear it. So these two guys, Russ Bankston and DJ Clark Kent, had this TV show on.
I know DJ Clark Kent.
You do?
Yeah.
He hasn't responded to me yet on Instagram, but Russ Bankston has a copy of the book. Russ Bankston. And so they would end every episode with "Wear your kicks." And so there is a thing of like, you get them, you got to wear them. When I was in San Francisco, so in San Francisco, you actually see these sneakers on people's feet. Same with New York City. Here where I am is absolute zero. No recognition. No, you got to go down to Springfield and hang out outside the courthouse, and then you see the Jordans. But here it's like zero, absolute nothing. But yeah, in San Francisco, you see them all the time. And there was one day that it was terrible rain, and this guy was wearing these amazing Bred 11s that are like a total collector item. And I was like, man, how could you wear those on this rainy day? He's like, they're just sneakers. So I think there is a thing where you have to wear them. And so now I'm at this point, like these I wore. This bottoms are still very clean, but I've worn them. But I have this pair that I've never worn. And so now the question is, what do I wear when I go out to do the readings? It's either going to be these or this other pair that look like they're made out of baseball glove leather. They're amazing.
Were you a Sneed before the book or since the book?
Sned.
Sned, excuse me.
I prefer Sneed.
Really?
No, just because it sounds more awkward.
Do you know any Sneds, Brett?
I don't know any Sneds. I didn't know that you were a Sned.
Well, I was a very repressed Sned for a long time. I was really into sneakers in high school and college. In college, we would go to the mall and look at the sneakers on the weekends. But and we had to know all the new releases. But I didn't buy that many because I always had like a very rational Jewish upbringing of like, how could you have more than 2 or 3 pairs of sneakers that are like ready to go and clean at any point in time? The only way you could buy new sneakers is if yours are like so beat up that it's time to buy new sneakers. And then I started meeting these people in California that had more than 60 pairs of sneakers, 60 pairs of Jordans. And in researching this book, I let out my inner Sned. And it's still within in comparison to other sneds, it's very much within reason. But yeah, Kelly thinks I'm pretty crazy, but it's very much within reason, and it's less than 15 pairs.
So I wanted to ask about your process in developing the sort of story,
Yeah.
because when I finished this, like comparing to Jack Wakes Up, because I've read Jack Wakes Up and Maltese Jordans, and the tone's very different. One is obviously like super fast-paced action film kind of vibe. This one's like almost not quite comedic, but it's like a little bit. It's much more like less serious in the way that things are presented. And I was wondering, did you like set out to be like, all right, I'm gonna kind of make just a fun one this time, or did it just evolve into that over time as you got into the concept and realized, no, actually, I'm gonna make it about the shoes? Like, I'm just curious how that came about.
Yeah. I think the more that I've gotten to know the genre, like when I first started out, I just was like, oh, this has to have guns and drugs and plot and cars and shit happening. And
When did it not have to have plot? Sorry there, but I just thought I'd ask.
maybe I misspoke. When I first started out, though, it had to be all about something driving it forward. And so it was all about the action, I guess is a better way to put it. So I thought, based on what I had read in the genre, that it had to be something like, I mean, I guess I was more basing it on action movies at that point than I was basing it on really reading the genre deeply. And now I've read much more in the genre. I feel like I have more of a sense about what I want to do with this kind of story. I don't want to have big car chases and big shootouts. I feel kind of guilty about how big the car chases and shootouts got to be in This Is Life and Checkmate. I had this doctor in San Francisco who a friend gave This Is Life, and he read all the Jack Palms books, and he said, like, this book is pretty much all mayhem, right? And it's just like, Checkmate is like insanity from beginning to end. And I feel like I wanted to pull back on that as I started going forward. And so the sneakers were just kind of a throwaway. Like, it was not a throwaway, but it really came into the story from out of the blue to me. Like, I was just writing a story of Jack going to find this guy's thing. I knew the story was going to go to Kauai. And when he got to the guy's house, he found this amazing sneaker closet. And I wrote the short story and showed it to my friend. And he's like, you got to do more with the sneakers. He just sort of was able to key in and say something like, there's some real energy around the sneakers. And he wanted me to take the story and build it into a novel. And when I did, I really like dove into that sneaker well. And there's so much in the book that wound up being about sneaker collecting and these characters and what the sneaker culture has become, but also really into the history of Jordan and his game and some of these sort of NBA conspiracy concepts that I found out through my research as well.
So this was originally going to be a short story, and it was just so enjoyable that eventually you relented and turned it into a novel?
I just wanted to write a short story and publish it so I could write off a trip to Kauai that we took for Christmas or New Year's a while ago. And then I showed it to my friend who's an editor, and he said, you got to turn this into a novel. This is good. I like it. I want to see you turn it into a novel. And there's really something here about the sneakers. And yeah, I did that. And I gave it back to him in the summer of 2014. And then, honestly, seriously, so I gave it to him in the summer of 2014. He loved what it was as a novel. He had a few notes about building this out and building that out. And then I showed it to Thomas and Mercer, or I told them the concept of it. I was literally thrilled with this book, buying Jordans, excited about the book. In Broad Daylight was doing really well. And I basically had it in my head that if In Broad Daylight sold a certain amount, they were going to buy my next book. And it sold that amount. And so I was like, great, Maltese Jordans, you guys are going to crush it. And they're like, no, we don't like that idea. We don't think Jack Palms can sell. We don't want that. So I ended up having to say to them, like, well, I have half of this other novel, which wound up being Everyone Pays. And they're like, that's the one that we want. I don't think we will publish this Jordan's one with Jack Palms. We're really not into male characters because we don't think that we can sell them to our Kindle audience. And I was like, here's this project that I am so passionate about and excited about. And here's this other thing. And you're saying that you want me to do the other thing. So I did the other thing, and it turned into Everyone Pays. And the title changed. All these things changed. I sold out, and it wasn't worth it in the end. The money that I got for it, what didn't justify all the work on that book. And I was really frustrated. And somehow it got to the point where I showed the Maltese Jordans to Rich. I don't even understand what happened there. Do you, Rich?
I think I read this 2 summers ago. And what struck me was, I mean, I'm a basketball fan, although I'm not an NBA fan anymore. I was a basketball fan growing up. I watched the Celtics. I know who the big three are. And this is the first time I really read an intersection of like sports and caper. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't seen anything like that before. I mean, certainly growing up, there were all kinds of sports fiction, but it was more geared towards like an 8th grade crowd. And I thought there's not a lot of fiction for adults that like sports. And I thought this was a great intersection. And I hadn't read anything like it before.
Do you remember how it ended up that I gave it to you?
You said, you're not doing anything. Why don't you read this? I think that was it.
But it was firmly like on the shelf in a drawer. And I don't know how I got the idea that I was going to pull it out, but I did. I think I wanted to do Patreon. So this guy, Mike Bennett, was doing really well on Patreon. And he came out of the woodwork and said, hey, you used to podcast. You should do Patreon. So I was like, oh, all right, I'll do the Maltese Jordans. And so then I wanted to revise it, and I showed it to Rich, and I ended up doing some revision on it. I mean, ultimately, I probably could have published it 4 years ago or 2 years ago without doing any revision on it. Who knows? But anyway, whatever. So, yeah, it was hiding away for quite a while.
I thought you were writing this chapter by chapter last year.
No, it was done, and I was revising chapter by chapter. And then when I went on that big string of revision, I just revised basically the second half of it, or the last 2/3 of it. I just went on like a massive revision binge. And the thing about that was good was that it really got me to dive further into the text. And I think the second half of the book is much stronger for that, because I was really able to build out some of the scenes and slow down and do the sort of descriptive stuff. I think the Trump stuff got better. The stuff in New York got better. Mahogany making the appearance in the hotel was new. Stuff like that.
Was Mahogany in your other books?
No.
I really like
a new character. Yeah, she's funny, right?
She's good. I'm glad that you put more of her in there.
Yeah, and the Mahogany thing with Gina was sort of weird, the way they were playing off each other, cutting each other down. Gina punching out Mahogany only came about in the very last revision. And that was one of the things where like I had no idea that was going to happen until I literally was writing the scene that day. And then it's like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Same with Trump. And same with the last scene. Like there were scenes like when Modi and Jack were on the plane and they're talking about like, would you do anything for this? Or what's the one thing that you would? And then it just felt like I didn't really have my eye on the ball of thinking what Jack would want. And then at the end, it just came together and it was like, yeah, he would want to make a movie. And it just kind of all clicked at the end there.
I really like the ending, and I'm wondering, are you explicitly setting up for another fun Hollywood caper, Jack tries to make a movie kind of story?
I don't know. There's a Bukowski book called Hollywood about the making of the movie Barfly, which is pretty hilarious.
You could call it Jack Comes Back.
Yeah. So the idea that I had originally was that I could write one about him making a movie. But then there was the idea that like someone was saying recently that there would be an idea that like something involving Trump gets pissed off because Jordan still won't be friends with him, so he wants his money back. I don't know. There's something weird like that. And I really have no idea. But I had no idea what this book was going to be about when I started writing it. I literally was just like, I got to write something with Kauai in it so that I could write off part of this trip. And it just was like diving into this. There was this guy, you guys know the filmmaker Errol Morris. He did Thin Blue Line and Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control. He makes really good movies. Anyway, he came to speak at this school that I was teaching at, and he said if you just leave someone alone and let them talk for like 5 minutes, they'll reveal to you what their obsessions are. Or there's something else where it's like whatever your obsessions are, they'll come out in your work even if you're not trying to. And so it was just like by writing this thing, I was able to tap into something that I had such a love for, several things that I had such a love for. And once I found those and really started diving into those, it just made the whole process more fun. And I think made the book much more fun. I mean, it's like at the end of the day, whatever's going to happen with a book that you write, it makes such a difference if you really have that passion for it and you feel like this is fucking good. Like when I wrote Young Junius, it was like, I don't know if anyone's going to want this book. I don't know if anyone cares about it. I was afraid that Black people were going to get upset with me for writing it. And it was just a book that I wanted to write. And it has sold worse than everything else. But up until this book, it's the one that I'm most proud of and that I think is the best. And now I really feel that way about this book. And, you know, it just really changes the game. Like when you're excited about a book and you're just, yeah. So I have these obsessions just kind of came about and it made writing it more fun.
Did you describe Jack Palms in more detail in earlier books?
There's one.
Not much description.
No, in Jack Wakes Up, he's like looking at himself in the reflection. And there's kind of like a mirror description of him. But no, not so much. I don't think I did a lot of that.
I wanted to ask about the fight scenes.
Yeah.
When you're writing these fight scenes, like I was trying to write a fight scene recently and I found myself sitting at the desk being like, is that, how do you choreograph these things in your head? Do you diagram? Are you thinking how it works? Like how are you actually kind of mapping out the fight scenes? Because there's so much that goes on with people diving at each other and these big Kaloa brothers doing things and Jack's doing things and he's left hook, right hook. And how do you choreograph that out in your head?
So we were just talking about this piece that Bennett wrote. Andrew Peterson, hello. Maybe not. So we were just talking about this piece that Bennett wrote and talking about how it was really clear as we were reading it that he could see these characters in his head as he was writing. And I just really try to visualize them. Like the scene where they're fighting at Modi's mother's house is kind of a lot of mayhem. And I was literally like, this brother is here and this brother is here. And I said, it was this brother that got hit like this. And so I was trying to figure all that out. But a fight like where Jack goes and roughs up Mac at the surf shop, or like when Jack fights the guy at the bar, those are just really straightforward to me. And I really picture them and see it happening. And then, yeah, I just really try to picture it, slow it down, see it happening. When I was a kid, I used to like have these G.I. Joe toys that would have these long, elaborate fight scenes. And one of the things about the Lee Child fight scenes that I think is interesting is that he really shows that people don't take a lot of punishment. Like if you watch like a Tom Cruise movie or a Transporter 3, like these guys just get the shit beat out of them for hours. Die Hard or any of those. And it's like real people can't take that kind of punishment. So like in the Reacher books, the guys seem really tough, but you kick someone in the knee and they're like done. Or someone gets punched in the head and they're done. And so I like that aspect of like the fight's not lasting too long or being too drawn out. Yeah.
That's interesting because I did notice that. Like, I was like, these guys kind of give up. Like, Jack just walks in, punches a few times, and then they're done. And I was like, these guys are like just big pussies. You know, what's going on? But I guess you're right. In real life, that does make sense. But I did have a moment in my head where I'm like, really? Like, this guy just comes along and says, give me some money for Gina, who, you know, he's never seen this guy with Gina before.
Yeah.
And just hits him a few times. And he's like, here's some money. It's like, I should get into that line of business.
Well, his guy, like the guy who gives him the money doesn't even do the fighting. Like he's got this chef that will like do the fighting.
Right.
But that guy's
Yeah.
not really that. I mean, the reality is like these people are. So here's the difference between this and the earlier Jack Palm's books is that like nobody here is like a superhero. Like these are like normal guys. They don't fight to the death. They don't like fight out of pure adrenaline or bloodlust. And like Jack has learned to be decent in a fight. And so like you get these guys who are the Kaloas who are sort of more bark than bite. And you punch them in the nose and they're like, I don't really want to get involved in that. Or like this chef guy who's like paid to act tough for this guy at the bar, you punch him in the nose and he wants no more of it on any level. So, yeah, it seems like everyone is pretty human here. And then the guys on the podcast who reviewed it, the other thing that they were saying was like, nobody really wants to kill anyone else here. Like everyone is kind of like, yeah, we fought and now we're kind of friends and we can sort of work together if we need to. Yeah, it just feels like there's more of a human level of the interactions here. You know, most of these things I learned from mistakes. Like I had books that were like all massive fight scenes. And then I felt afterwards like I wanted to pull back on that. Or at the end of Young Junius, there's this huge, massive massacre in this stairwell that goes on for so long. And like there's just bodies all over the stairwell. And I sort of just wanted to pull back on that stuff.
And that policeman that would never die.
Is that the one that got thrown in the garbage?
Yeah, he just kept coming back.
That was awesome. I love when he got thrown in the
was
garbage by those two guys. They're just like, yeah, there's a dumpster out back and we're just going to put this police in. I love that stuff. That's the stuff that like you could never think up. And then you're like in the book writing it and it happens. And it's great. Like so many things happen in this book that I didn't see coming at all. And then they were so fun. They were really just fun to play with.
I was surprised that Jack had become so much of a gentleman he couldn't kick a guy in the balls twice.
Yep. That's one of the unwritten rules. Well, so Triad Deathmatch is kind of junky. I'm not very proud of it. But in Triad Deathmatch, Jack does meet this martial arts master who kind of gives him a little bit of training. And then that guy promptly gets killed off in one of the worst endings I've ever written.
I definitely noticed that Jack was much more capable in a fight. It almost felt like he was not challenged, like by anyone that he was fighting in the book, which was kind of a little disappointing. Like that was the one thing I was like, there was no moment here where I was actually worried about Jack being in danger. And so which is not to say it wasn't fun to read, but it was just when I finished, I was like, Jack kind of made it through this pretty easily, but I loved it the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like there's like big high stakes here. Like there's guns here, but I don't even think like any guns actually go off. So it's totally breaking the Chekhov rule. But yeah, I'm okay with that.
One goes off.
Which one?
When he shoots the silencer.
Modi fires it.
Yeah.
Modi's gun.
Modi shoots the silenced gun in the hotel room.
And then Jack's
Oh,
hoping
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of Jack Wakes Up, there's machine guns shooting everywhere. So the end of Jack Wakes Up is kind of like the shootout at the end of True Romance with what's his name and all those people in it, and that's just bullets everywhere. And then it's just like if you see a movie now, it's so cliche that you know there's going to be a big fight at the end. It's like the Bruce Lee movies would always have this big fight at the end, and so if you see any movie now, it's like, oh, there's going to be a big fight at the end, and I know who's going to win, but it's going to be really drawn out, blah blah blah, and then it's going to go this way, random. And so I definitely didn't want to have that, and I guess it just wasn't all that much about the fighting ultimately. But he did have to like beat that guy up in the bathroom to get the Jordans at the end.
Hold on. If you wrote this 4 years ago, Trump was in it then and he wasn't president?
Right. Trump is not president in the book. So this was like pre-president, pre-running for president Trump. He was just kind of harassing Obama about his birth certificate and fighting with Rosie O'Donnell. And so the editor, the copy editor for this piece thought that I should switch it and make it in the present and make Trump the president. And I didn't want any part of that because once he's the president, he's much more controversial and dividing. And so I tried to make it as clear as I could that this was happening in 2014, but I didn't want to spend too much time on that. So I had one reference to Mark Jackson coaching the Warriors, which some of you might have gotten. Juna, maybe? Yeah. It says on page 1 that it's 2014. And then when they're at the hotel and the sneaker guys are talking about Trump, they're all pissed off that he's going after Obama about the birth certificate. So those are things that I tried to do to place it in 2014.
So Seth, are Michael Jordan's lawyers okay with this book?
There's no reason that they wouldn't be. There's no reason that they wouldn't be. And a friend of mine is friends with the CFO of Brand Jordan, and this guy has a copy of the book, is reading it, and no cease and desist letters have arrived yet.
Good publicity if they do.
I was gonna say, is that necessarily a bad thing? Maybe you should have left the symbol on the book and just waited for a cease and desist letter.
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember taking a class where a guy, the cover looked like the Jim Beam logo,
Yeah.
and he said getting a cease and desist from Jim Beam was like the best bump in sales he'd ever gotten. Somehow he had that into the.
Well, when I was doing the podcast a long time ago, these listeners were designing different Jack Palms t-shirts. And one of them did a Jack Palms t-shirt just like Jack Daniels. And I had that for sale for a while. And I did have the Jack Daniels lawyers come after me and just basically tell me to take it down and stop selling it. And publicity-wise, that didn't work out super well. So I didn't think that would work so well for the book. And I don't want to have to like redo the cover or like have them garner. I don't know. I want to deal with any of that as little as possible. But you do have pretty wide leverage legally, as far as I know, in terms of using real characters in it. Yeah. There's a David Sedaris story about how him and Mike Tyson are lovers. So you guys should check that out. That got published. This is fun. Are you guys having fun? I'm drinking red wine. I'm getting all red. I'm very happy that multiple people are here. This is good.
So how did you come up with the name Jack Palms to begin with? I just listened to this podcast, this crime writer, and he's like, names are so important.
The early influences for Jack Palms were that movie Get Shorty. And so the main character in that was Chili Palmer. And then there was a famous snowboarder at some point whose name had palms in it. And he had these fans that were called the Palm Daddies or something like that. So anyway, Chili Palmer. I think the Elmore Leonard character, Chili Palmer, who was played by John Travolta in the movie. Other Andrew, it's nice to see you. Can you hear me?
Nice to be seen. I can, yeah. Hey,
I'm glad
how
that
are you?
you're here. Nell sends her
Congratulations.
regards. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great book
Yeah.
so far. I am not as far in, so I'm trying to avoid the spoilers, but I don't care. But I think I jumped in on the conversation when you were talking about the adult fighting, and I actually have really enjoyed that. I actually don't mind the fact that Jack, for once, doesn't seem like he's over his head, just trying to scram to keep himself alive by some fluke or whatever. I really enjoyed that. As far as Trump goes, the time frame you're talking about is when Letterman was on. It was basically, remember we used to have goofy Donald Trump on here, and you could mess up his hair, and he was a goof. And now we can't do that because he's kind of mean and terrible. And you're right at that crux with where he is right now. So that's exactly the one that you needed for that. If you did the presidential Trump, that completely changes the whole dynamic. And right now, that ending is just brilliant. So,
Thanks.
Well done.
Yeah. Rich. Yeah. When Rich and I talked about this, he was like, yeah, you did the Trump thing well. And I just think it works so much better if I could be very neutral about Trump. And I don't think I could write it that way now. But writing it in 2014, it was much easier to be really neutral on it.
I thought you nailed it with the line about Gina and aren't you so beautiful?
Maybe that got edited and revised a little bit for more. At least he didn't grab her by the. But I love the thing about the geishas, like the random white geishas in Trump Tower. Like it had to be weird. Like the geishas I thought were really funny, and the jeweler guy that comes out and has to appraise the sneakers. Like you have to pretty much, if you're going to take your characters up there into Trump Tower, you have to write weird at that point. Or I felt I did.
It seems like you had the most fun in writing this one. I mean, like I said, I'm not done with it yet. I had seen the stuff that led to the ending.
That's right. You were reading for me when I was doing the revision too.
Yeah, but it just seems like all the way through, there's just a level of fun with this.
Yeah,
that isn't quite as prevalent, and I don't mean that to sound bad. It really seems like you just enjoyed the hell out of writing this one. Is that accurate? Am I getting the right vibe?
Absolutely. I was so passionate to like go to these sneaker stores and like check out the sneakers on special release days and see the weird guys that were hanging out on them, and they would use language that I'd never heard. One guy, I was at this place. And this sneaker had just come out, and I didn't think I was going to get it. So I ordered it online, and then I went to the store and they had it. And the guy was like, "Oh, you're going to get those, right?" And I said, "No, I bought them online." He's like, "Oh, well, you could just buy those and DS them." And it was like the fact that he used DS as a verb with me, and I actually knew what that was. I was like, "Whoa, I'm in this. This is amazing. Yeah, this is great." So it was fun, but in terms of the process, in writing this, I allowed myself much more leeway to do research while I was writing. And earlier, I was much more regimented about getting the word count every day. And I had high word counts that I was shooting for, like 1,500 words or 2,000 words a day. And so I would be really regimented about getting that and shutting off the internet, not doing any research. And then sometimes I would just like do a little bit of research if I needed to know something about guns. But with this, there were so many rabbit holes that I could go down on YouTube to look at like old Jordan game footage, or Jordan talking about Bird, or Bird talking about Jordan, or it's like, well, what did Bird say about Jordan in that game? And so I would go and watch. And then like, there's so many videos online of people, these crazy sneaker collectors, like basketball players, rock stars, rappers, random people with crazy sneaker collections, these things, and then videos about sneakers. And there was just so much like that video, this show Quick Strike that DJ Clark Kent and Russ Bankston are on. Like I just would stumble across these things and find them and just allow myself to have the time to enjoy them. And I gotta say that was really good for the book, was just to like, I talk about the process and sort of being disciplined and getting the work done. And I think it's also really good to allow the space to look into that research stuff and sort of allow yourself to have fun with it as well. And it really paid off.
Something you said before I wanted to ask more about. You said you felt guilty about the scale of the craziness in some of the other novels.
Yeah.
Why is that? Like, I'm just curious if that's because there's also, you've now, how old's Willow now? 6?
Yeah.
So you've now written a much more, not quite kid friendly, but like a much more like chill version of Jack Palms. And I wonder how much of that is also you
That's
getting.
interesting. It's interesting. I think, yeah. I think the more that I do stuff like it's like for every book, I could point to like certain things that really influenced it. But then there's some things that really blend together a whole lot of different influences. And like the more that I look at this book now, the more I realize that for a really long time, I read a ton of sports nonfiction. Like I used to read all these biographies about Larry Bird and the Big Three and Michael Jordan books and Phil Jackson books and biographies of like Barkley, Manute Bol, the Fab Five, Dick Vitale, like all this crazy. My stepmother used to, basically my parents wanted me to read anything that I would read. And so they would get me all these sports books and I would read them, Bill Bradley. And there's just something really fun about a good sports story, well told. I used to read Bob Ryan in the Boston Globe. Bill Simmons is a guy that writes now that I like a lot. And, looking back on it, it's just like more and more of these influences coming together. But I think with the early Jack Palm stuff, I was really going off a lot of action movies and really blending some of those things. And now I've read much more deeply in the genre. Like if you look at like The Long Goodbye, Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe, there's not a huge amount of violence in that either. And so if you really get to like the good crime fiction and hard boiled, like there's not a huge amount of violence. There's not a lot of violence in the Maltese Falcon. And so, once I sort of started pulling away from like the action movie template or like what I assumed that some of these guys were doing, I think it lands more. So Everyone Pays was really a procedural, which I don't feel all that comfortable with. In Broad Daylight was kind of like that, but more sort of winging it. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is just a softer me.
But you said you felt guilty. That was the thing that kind of piqued my interest. Or was that just turn of phrase?
Well, just in the sense that it's like, if I look back on it, it's like, well, if I read that now, would I think it was a good book? Or like, I just want someone to read a book and come away with more than like, wow, that was mayhem. Or like, wow, that was 200 pages of like a big ass fight or something like that. And so, yeah, like I want to have more humor. I want to have more fun. And, there was something with This Is Life and Checkmate. Those were really written with the serialized audience in mind, and people were listening to my stuff and they wanted more Jack Palm stuff. And, they really went for that action stuff. And it was fun to write that stuff and podcast it and really put it out in a serialized fashion. And then as books, it's more than 10 years later and I'm like, oh, here's this book. I don't know. But yeah, this just feels like really the book that I wanted to write. And so,
But when you're writing a serial, like a week to week or month to month or whatever, I mean, don't you basically have to end each installment like on something that's going to bring you back the next week? Like it can't be that quiet a story, right? I mean, doesn't everything have to have a, you know, um, like he turned and saw the muzzle of the gun, you know, ooh, continue next week, or, you know, that's when the bottom fell out of the floor next week, you know. If you
kind
were
of a
writing these
cliffhanger.
as installments like that, wouldn't that have contributed to the original books being much more action?
I wasn't really writing them that way. Like I was writing them in my head as novels, and then I would just cut them up to places where I thought that uh, it would make a good cliffhanger or something like a cliffhanger. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just, back then I was really into things like The Sopranos and Dexter and more violent things.
Now what are you into?
Sneakers. Sneakers and basketball, obviously.
Ah, well, beyond sneakers and basketball, I mean, because you're going to have to write another book at some point.
It's a good question, actually. Like, what's next? If this was the one that your current loves, you must have an idea, unless you're just riding the wave of this right now.
I'm just going to ride this wave right into the sunset.
Good. I don't believe that at all. But
This is like my drop the mic. This is my drop the mic effort. Like, did what I wanted to do with it, drop it.
Cool.
Did it, drop it, that's the end of it? Do I believe that for a second?
Connie gave it to you. Jack comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack comes back. The movie story. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it would be fun to do like
He's always been a one-hit wonder. Now he could be like a one-hit, two-hit, or a 1-2 punch wonder.
1.5 hit wonder. But I don't know. Like, could he really keep it together with those other two if they were all going to try to fund it together? I don't see them sticking around together for the long term.
You have options. I mean, words are plastic. You can make up any name. You can make up any character.
Yeah.
You have options.
I know. Here's the thing that I would say.
Tell me. Dini.
I mean, so in recent memory, the most I worked on this book was when I was doing that revision stretch last summer. And you guys were seeing like regular updates on what that work was like. I don't know how much you could tell, but I was really having fun. And when I wrote the original draft of this, I was having fun. And when I wrote As Much Protein as an Egg, I was having a hell of a lot of fun. And so there's something about really diving in and immersing yourself in that writing process that is a hell of a lot of fun and can be a hell of a lot of fun. It's like if you look at working out from the outside, you're like, man, that looks like a pain in the ass. I'd rather just go home and sit on the couch. But once you really get into a good workout or some sort of routine that you get really into and involved in, you enjoy it. And it's something that you look forward to and you like those events. And it's the same with writing, only more. It's like, I really had a great time revising this last summer, and I would love to do another book that I can really throw myself into in full and immerse myself in it and just really love. And I really know that I'm not ready for that right now.
Probably not. But there's always next year.
There's always next year. And I mean, yeah, I am getting, as I get older, more and more of these decisions become based on practical stuff and sort of like the nuts and bolts of life. And I don't know. That's how it is sometimes, for better or worse. So right now, I'm doing something else.
It was funny. I was watching the Margaret Atwood masterclass,
Yeah.
which is pretty great. And she said that after finishing a book, she doesn't write any prose. She just writes poetry. And then when she gets bored of that and starts to feel a story, she then goes back to writing prose. And those periods can last for quite a while, she says. So it's interesting. Like sometimes you just need a break, when you finish such a big project.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, sometimes I just need to do more work of another variety. So it's teaching or coaching or getting other things going. You guys will all get an email soon about what kind of classes you would be interested in taking from me. So look for that, but I don't know. Can I read a page or two of a part that somebody really likes?
It's an author reading moment.
Good. And then I'm going to go right to sleep. You guys can help me out because I've been thinking about what to read. I'm doing a reading in Cambridge, Andrew. I hope you'll be there on the 29th.
When is that?
April 29th. It's a Monday night, Porter Square Books. Sharing
I'm adding
with
it to my calendar right now.
two other writers. I'm also doing East Hampton and New York City and California down the road. So I'm thinking about parts that I really would like to read and that would go over well for an audience. I've read the part where Jack is in the hotel with Modi and Modi's kind of explaining to him about the backstory of Jordan. And he talks about how it was in Malta, but then he says it's not in Malta. It's really Saudi Arabia. That would be ridiculous. Here's the king of Malta's name. What other parts do you guys think would be good for reading with an audience? I will, Connie. You better believe it.
Where does Jack actually get to touch the Jordans? It's towards the end. Because you can just feel the vibe when he picks it up and he touches it.
He doesn't touch it. Does he not touch it in the Kaloa's house?
I don't think he touched it in the Cole's house.
No, they don't let him.
The Kaloas are kind of comedic, right? They're sort of like these meth dealer tough guys, but they're also kind of funny. And their mom, I like their mom. She's weird.
That scene where the kitchen fight is a good one. And if you had enough time, then going into the part where they show him or is that a separate part? Because the two that I thought of is the fight in the kitchen, because that's really funny.
Yeah.
And then the part where he sees the Jordans, they go and they won't show it to him. They make him watch the YouTube video first.
I love the YouTube videos though. Did you guys like the YouTube videos? I love the YouTube videos. It's like the witnessing of Bigfoot on YouTube, except it's Jordan playing in this game.
I really believe those videos existed. You did a very good job of convincing me.
I know a lot of people think that this whole thing is real. I think it would be, it's good.
Fake news.
It's totally fake news. I've been running ads on Facebook and a ton of people are clicking on the ad for the book and no one is buying it once they get to the Amazon page. And I've been trying to figure out why that is. And I think people actually think that it's a real story about Jordan and they're going to get this like amazing story about Jordan. And then they find out it's a novel and they're like, oh, no, I don't want it. Anyway, so I need to tweak the ad. But the ads have been getting a ton of clicks and no one's buying the book. It's kind of amazing. Okay, so what's the vote for? What part?
I'll take the kitchen fight.
The kitchen fight?
Yeah, let's go with the kitchen fight.
The kitchen fight chapter is called Red Harvest. Do you guys know what that's a reference to?
Dashiell Hammett.
Totally. Great book. I had fun with the titles. I haven't titled the chapters of a book before this one, except I did that on the new version of Checkmate. I like the chapter titles. Did anyone have thoughts about those? Any chapter titles that you particularly liked?
I liked them all. I thought that seemed like a lot of work to do all of that.
It was a little bit of work, but not too much work. I like that there was a long string of them that were like the box, the kicks, the plan, the dream. Did you guys notice the titles of the sections? There's 4 parts. Part 1 is the runner. Part 2 is something else. Oh, part 2 is the Maltese Jordans. Part 1 is the runner. Part 2 is the shoes. Part 3 is the con, and part 4 is the Don. Old. I like that.
Yeah, you can't tell that you're enjoying that at all.
I was loving it. It was so fun. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, on page 213, there's a reference to these Air Force One sneakers that Bobito designed. And that's the guy who wrote me and gave me his address today for me to send him a copy of the book. So I'm excited about that.
Babito.
Bobito.
Yeah, were they real shoes? Like
Those are real
all the
shoes.
so all the Jordans that you mentioned are real Jordans.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
And the Kanye West Red Octobers are real. And that story about the guy offering, there was a pair of Red Octobers that this kid had at a conference, and this guy offered him $94,000 for them, and the kid didn't sell them. They were
Whoa.
signed Kanye West Yeezy Red Octobers. The kid had them in a big glass case. He didn't sell them for $94,000.
If you're reading for the audience to set a hook, I think the arrival at the Trump Tower is pretty interesting.
But you don't want to go too late to give anything away. It's dangerous to like give anything away, like when Jack touches the shoes or something like that.
Or just that they went to see Trump.
Yeah. But that is kind of a spoiler. Didn't the Trump like reveal, wasn't that kind of good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very good, actually.
Right.
Yeah, I was half worried you weren't gonna go there, but you did.
Go to Trump Tower?
Just having Trump in it at all. I thought it was gonna be, through a closed camera system, and that's all they would get, and then the jeweler shows up. Actually, I think the jeweler part could be good if you just kept it narrow on that, because it wouldn't necessarily reveal anything, would it?
Yeah, you can't boo that. You can't. I think there's some question throughout the book of whether the sneakers even exist. So to give them in a reading and let people, you can't go too far in.
That's right.
Maybe that's why. So the fight scene in the kitchen might be good. Give a good sense of the tone of the book, but also they talk about the sneakers during that, right?
I don't know. Let's find out. Now Doc turned me around, and I saw the 4th brother enter the room, the one I hadn't seen at Modi's. He was smaller than the other and younger by a few years. This would be the one named after Jay Leno. If they all had the same mother, he came from a different father for sure. I could hear Johnny walking their mother toward the bedrooms, doing his best to calm her down. I'm not moving, I said. Even if I wanted to, Doc held me tight. Big Eddie got up off the floor behind us. To the smaller brother, he said, I got this, Jay. Hang on. He came around to look me in the face. I should break you right now. Is this the part we're talking about?
I think so.
All right. Modi said, do what they tell you, Jack. Doc told his brother where I had a gun, and Eddie went for it. He plucked it right out of the back of my shorts. This, he said. You brought this into our house? Eddie shook his head. That is terrible manners. Then he cracked me across the cheek with its stock while his brother held me still. I tasted blood on the inside of my mouth and spit onto the floor. Let my biggest fan clean that up once her boys had finished with me. Even Modi said, Jesus, Jack. I laughed. This whole thing was becoming a comedy of errors, a series of mistakes that was drawing me deeper and deeper into trouble. Eddie paced in front of me, waiting to decide his next move, but Leno whistled to get his attention. then stopped him in his tracks with one look. Bring it, I said. Show me what you got, boys. Instead, Leno tightened his grip on Modi's neck, putting on the full squeeze. Modi whined. His knees buckled. Leno said, take him outside. Doc walked me backward toward the front door. Eddie went around to open it, and we all walked outside onto the welcome mat. I heard Modi scream from back in the living room, and I pictured Johnny and Leno working him over, trying to find out where he had his money. Eddie slammed the door shut behind him. Now it was just the three of us outside, me, Doc, and Eddie. Doc let me go, which almost made it a fair fight, except Eddie was holding a gun. The funny part was that I knew it wasn't loaded, that I'd left the bullets back in the glove box of my Jeep, and I was the only one. Eddie didn't seem eager to use it as anything other than a blunt object anyway. He spread his arms. We out here now, Jack. What you want? What you come to this island for? Modi, I said. I'm taking him back. So why you come here then? You had him. He shook his big head. Try again. Modi and now the shoes. He smiled as wide as his face could handle. The Maltese Jordans, he said. Then he laughed. They legend. You for real think they exist? And we let you just walk away with them? I shifted my weight from one foot to another, waiting for one of them to make a move. I also read his face, trying to read any tell he might be giving up. Nothing. Well, are they? His face barely moved as he said, oh, they real, and they here, where they gonna stay. Let me see them. Now his smile widened as he nodded. Suddenly he understood what I was doing. Maybe I did too. You look? You leave? What about Modi? You take him back dead. Does that help you? I thought it over. No, I need him alive. Let's work this out. That took things down about 7 levels. They looked like they still didn't trust me, but it went from an 11 to about a 4. We all walked back inside where we found Modi massaging his neck and Mama Kaloa reading her boys the riot act. So they don't even fight there. They fight a little bit in the kitchen before that. Is that what you're talking about? Or was that part good?
That part was good.
That part was good.
It had a certain amount of personality.
Yeah, it's true. Johnny
Yeah,
threw the... What?
I was just going to say you're missing the fun of the mum, but now she comes in, right?
She comes back in, but then there's also the part here where they throw the milk jug and break the table, and she gets all pissed off.
Yeah, that's the funny bit.
Yeah. Damage done, bro. Yeah, then she yells at them. Yeah. We will see. We will see.
Maybe
Thanks,
you could
guys.
start from the bit where he's talking about the Maltese Jordans and then go into the mother being angry.
Where they talk about the Maltese Jordans?
Yeah, like when he spreads his arm wide and, oh, you think they're real?
Oh, yeah.
Then you could go from that point into the kitchen and then the funny part with the mum. Just an idea.
Yeah, hold on. I gotta see if that's there. Oh, and then they go into the bedroom. Oh, yeah. Then she comes in. You boys all come clean or I go wild for all the damage you done to my furniture. Leno said, Jesus, we'll pay for it. She slapped him across the back of his head. The Lord's name. Jack Palms, what's going on here? Yeah. No Shylocking true islanders. He's your friend. Very good. Well, thanks to you guys all for being here. I appreciate you very much for enjoying the celebration. I'm suitably Wednesday night drunk and going right to bed. And
Oh man, Wednesday night and drunk, all at the same time. I tell you.
no, it's Wednesday night drunk. It's a kind of drunk that is suitable for a Wednesday night. It's a Wednesday night drunk. You don't want a Friday night drunk on a Wednesday, but a Wednesday night drunk is like just a little.
Your little whatever.
I've had 1 glass of wine. I think I'll be all right.
I don't know.
And it was half the size of the one that Juna had. Juna, how's yours doing? Let's see. Oh, wow. Bottoms up. Thanks, everybody, for being here. More to come, and I'll have recordings of this and the workshop for everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for buying your copies, and
Congratulations again, Seth.
Congrats.
Really well done.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Great job. Yes, yay.
thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care, friend.
Okay.
Cheers.
All
right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.